Endicott podcast. This week we are going to be talking about the Astros cheating scandal and what should be done or what should have been done. So those of you who don't know, pretty much the Astros during the 2017 and 2018 seasons were found guilty of, at least as far as we know, because the investigation's still ongoing to a large degree, but they were found guilty of placing video cameras in garbage cans and looking down home plate and stealing signs. And not only were they stealing signs, they were doing so with like running it through an algorithm, so they were getting spit out results that were accurate almost beyond human error. So the MLB commissioner came out and started investigating. They granted players immunity, and players started squealing. Almost rightfully so, because at that point, what do you do? But they started revealing that it was a big thing. Not only were they involved in it, the higher ups, the GMs were involved in it, and it helped them bring home some titles. So, I mean, I I don't know. I mean, as
hmm
far as what should be done to players, I mean, they're granted immunity, so you can't really do anything now. But they probably should have been fine. I mean, you think at least a fine or at least out for a year or something like that, right? What do you think? I mean, shit.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree to the extent that I feel like there should be some sort of punishment for your participation in that because as a baseball player, I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where they can make the claim that it was orchestrated from on high, um, from the front office and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, you still had to, follow along with that and agree to go along with it and know that it was going on and not speak out publicly or, file something privately with the MLB to kind of be a whistleblower and go against it. So at the end of the day, I do feel like there should be some responsibility and accountability for that because, these are guys that are also getting, contracts and money based on their numbers and their success as a team and as individuals. So as you go into the free agency market, for example, and you've recently just won a World Series title, or your numbers are inflated as far as a hitter because you knew what pitches were coming half the entire season or the entire season, then I mean, I feel like that definitely does cheap people out. And I feel like they should be held some sort of to some sort of degree accountable for that. I feel like the ownership probably should face the brunt of it, to be honest with you, so that owners, from the future or for the future will know that they can't let their organizations act like that and get away with it. And I think if you threaten the owners and their access to that power, I think that's probably the best mechanism to make sure that this sort of thing never happens again. But that's personally probably my opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree that is something that should probably never happen again, but I do think it's one of those things where there's I guess it's multiple heads to the question, right? Like, how deep does it go? Was it only the
Yeah,
Astros? Was it only like maybe the Red Sox and possibly the Mets? Because the core involvement in the Carlos
yeah.
Beltran's involvement, or is this
Even
something that goes like 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 teams deep, and like they don't
yeah,
want
the
they don't
Cardinals
want
have
to.
been brought up as far as it being exported to them. I mean, there's a lot of and I feel like that's probably the case. Is that maybe the Astros were maybe the most clumsy about it, or maybe they've gotten the most sunlight or scrutiny applied because of the fact that they've won titles and people are really frustrated and upset about that and want them to be held accountable. Um, and maybe there are other teams that haven't gotten to that level of success but are still running some sort of scheme like that. And maybe the MLB does have an invested interest in trying to make it seem as if it's just, a couple of you know, people in the front office on one team that you can simply, get out of the picture and fire and replace with new people so we can look forward to the future. But if it's something where, you're talking about, 5, 10, maybe more organizations that have some sort of involvement at that I feel like it definitely, I think there's a lot more information that we don't know yet that we're going to find out over the next few months and so on and so forth. That's going to shed light on that. And I think that the MLB is going to have to respond to that. Because I feel like they're kind of on thin ice with this whole thing. Because right now, if they can isolate it to just this one team and this one instance, then that's probably fine. But if it starts like really getting deep and all these other teams get exposed for it, and the entire question of is anybody winning in this league based on merit, is everybody just cheating? I feel like that could be really problematic for them.
Yeah, and I know off the air we talked about this a little bit, but I was saying I think the health of the league is almost more important than any individual team punishment. I do think that, like, my initial reaction is, yeah, you should punish the Astros, you should punish anybody involved, even the players, But okay, so for starters, they were granted immunity. I know I've said this a bunch of times now, but they were granted immunity, so I have a problem going back on the immunity they were granted. The only way is maybe like if it was like a super corrupt way they achieved it or something. You know what I mean? Then maybe it should be looked at. But even then, like you know, if you're a player and you're told you're going to be immune, like you squeal or something, then you can't go back on your word if you're the league. But at the same time, like I said, my first reaction is to punish these people, is to be rough on them, is to have big sanctions and stuff. But then again, I think the health of the league is more important, and if it goes really deep, as like many think it might, then it would be problematic. If say you were to suspend the whole starting lineup for the Astros, even for like 50 games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you have to do that to every team that does something like this, which is fine. But what if it is 10 teams? What if it is 10 teams deep, or even 5 teams deep? Then
it does becomes the league can't really work.
Yeah, because that's not only taking money, because like we're thinking of it like, fuck the Astros, good, then that'll take money out of their pockets. That doesn't only take money out of their pockets. That takes money out of the pockets of the players that would replace those people. That takes money out of the people that the Astros would play. That takes money out of the people that, like, if the Mets and Red Sox had to have their lineup sit, that would take money out of all their pockets. Mm-hmm. And so like that's what I mean. Is like I do think like, well, they should be punished. Like even if they punish everybody involved 10 games, players. I'm talking players. Mm-hmm. That would at least send a message that it's wrong, and like a slap on the wrist. But like quite literally, there's no slap on the wrist now. It doesn't exist because they were granted immunity. So fuck. But then I think if I think if players, so like now I guess to go back on that a little bit, if they were to now start suspending players and doing that, what do you think like there's public outcry now, then the Players Association would or Players Union would freak the fuck out. You know what I mean? That would not be okay with them.
Right. I think that's part of the issue with it. I mean, as far as definitely like, well, there's kind of a back and forth on that, right? As far as originally, Manfred, the commissioner, basically came out and said that, the reason why they granted immunity to the players originally is because, it was at the urgence of the Players Association that they were requiring that basically to move forward. And the Players Association basically said that that wasn't necessarily the case, that Manfred and the league just came out and straight up said that they were going to give the players immunity and so on and so forth. So, I mean, you don't know really necessarily where the truth lies between both of those narratives, but I think it is kind of an interesting back and forth between both sides on that. I mean, when it comes to that, I do agree that, if you grant people immunity, it's kind of hard to go back and then say like, oh, well, by the way, never mind, because it might jeopardize your ability to gather information maybe down the road for future investigations against players or teams. Maybe they won't be as willing to work with you if they know that they can't trust your word. So I think that there is a risk that you run with that. But the other thing that I think that might open up that and even kind of eliminate the question is, let's just say, for example, that, they did grant them immunity under the whole notion that they were going to get the full truth and all of the full information. But what if it comes out that, for example, in 2019 that they did cheat, and there's a lot of information that maybe we didn't know about that becomes true or becomes, shed or exposed over the next year or so, where, they didn't tell the league and the investigators the full truth. And then the whole question of, the immunity kind of becomes moot because they didn't tell them everything. And you know what I mean? I think that there's maybe
I
a
think
part that
I
we got
think
to keep an eye on with that too.
lying to any investigators like that should be worse than, like, you know what I mean? That's worse than whatever you did in the first place. You know what I mean? That should be looked at almost like, I know there's actual MLB rules this year about what happens if like say the Astros are up to bat and like they start getting beamed by pitches. There's actual rules to like protect them now. So
Right.
I think it's almost like that where there will be people that they still want something done to them, and what, even if they have to take like revenge into their own hands or whatever, they're gonna do it. But there's rules to protect them. So I think it's the same way. The same way. It just like if a pitcher beams a batter this year, I think the league will go down hard on them.
I agree.
I think if
They're
somebody
definitely not
lied,
going to allow that.
if someone lied during the investigation, the league will go down hard on them. Not easy like they have been with everybody playing nice, you know. And I do think as long as everybody plays nice and tells the truth, there's not really reason to punish anybody.
Right.
You know, but if it goes deeper and if we keep finding out things, then yeah, I mean, sure. Like right now here, we're going to play a clip right here, and this is from Game 1, I believe, of the 2019 World Series, where there's alleging that they whistle for pitch calls. And yeah, we'll play that right here. But like, yeah, so it like you said, it might very well go deeper than that, but you know, we don't really know
That's
yet.
a question.
Yeah,
that we don't know.
On Yuli Gurriel.
That whistle right there.
Fly ball into left.
Seemed to indicate where the pitch was going.
Is off the wall. Astros lead
And this article too that we're looking at is, basically quoting the catcher from the Nationals from the World Series, and he was under the impression that they were definitely trying to steal signs and cheat. So I mean, there's a lot of speculation there, like we've been talking about. Not a lot of certainty, but I think that is going to be something that is going to come out, because I think there's a lot of really good reporters that are sniffing around this and are going to keep going for it, because I mean, why not? You know what I mean? It's a huge story. I think that the MLB and the Astros definitely did not anticipate it being as big or delayed or extended, I guess is the better word for it, in the public light. But I think that they have a real problem, and it really depends on what information continues to come out. I mean, if we find out that, everything that came out in the commissioner's report was pretty much true, that it was only in 2017 and 2018,
that was all, then yeah, I
mean, the people were held accountable, and, we can maybe move forward, then I think that, we can move forward as they can move forward as an organization with integrity, maybe going forward, and make sure it doesn't happen again. But yeah, if we do come out to find out that there's a lot more teams that were involved with it, yeah, I think that it begs the question as to where they go from there. Because like we talked about, they can't, suspend 10 teams from the competition. It's not like
I do
a college team where they violate things or sanction or violate the rules, and there's 200 teams. You can suspend them from like violate or competing in a bowl game or a tournament. But with this, it's a bit more difficult.
Well, I do want to make it clear, I do think that is what should be done. Like, if we're being fair and just, yeah, like, even the players that were granted immunity should be fucked. Even anyone involved in this should be, suspended. Like, yeah, the whole Houston Astros team should be suspended. But, like, given everything that's happened and all, immunity and all of this, like, I've said it's hard to go back on it. But also, let's not pretend the health of baseball isn't more important than this, because it is. Like, right. If money wasn't a factor, and if this was just a fair sport and everyone was just concerned with being fair, it's a no fucking brainer to suspend all these people and make everything fair and revoke the World Series. And like, if that were the case though, during the steroid era, we'd have to fucking revoke those too. Like, I just think, I don't think we can pretend to be the clean, squeaky sport that I guess everybody thought. You know what I mean? Like, during the steroid era, everybody came out and it was so against that, and now, like,
Yeah,
that
I
seems to have
definitely
been swept
agree
under the
that
rug.
you run the risk of that slippery slope of kind of uncovering all the skeletons of the past. And then, if everything as far as like the history of the true history of champions and the sport and how people got their victories, if all of that's ill-gotten, then it does kind of run the risk of running
it
or
could lead to the death of the MLB, like in a real sense.
Because that ruins people's heroes. That ruins people's aspirations as far as why they root for a team and an organization and buy their merch and go to the games and are so invested in their success is because they believe that these things are being done on merit and for the right reasons, and because it's a game that they grew up with and respect. And if all of that gets destroyed, I think it's a big problem.
Now, it is worth noting too that
held that lead and beat
Hold
the
on, let's see.
Astros in Game 5, and good chance he was in line to be an MVP if the Dodgers won that World Series. And, of course, even to this day, you talk about Kershaw and the possibility that, he's always been missing that one thing on his resume, not only the World Championship, but that big game moment. That could have been his moment, but Kershaw clearly was uncomfortable going back there and reliving that day.
Yeah, you mentioned that Game 5. He dominated Game 1, was dominating for a few innings of Game 5 before he blew those leads. Did Kershaw stop short of ultimately placing the blame for the result and the way he pitched on the Astros?
Yeah, Clayton Kershaw was not going there, but
yeah, so I mean, it like literally changed the destiny of a lot of people. You know what I mean? Like, not even that the Astros wouldn't have won, but maybe not. And it does put into perspective though that I do think the World Series trophy is just a trophy. As much as we want to place this importance on it and like, well, the champions of the past and all this. The reality is, all that history's been done. That title is just literally a trophy sitting in like a warehouse or in a trophy case. It's not going to change the way people remember the past. It's not. It might like kind of taint the way you think about Houston moving forward, but you still have those memories of like winning the playoffs, and it doesn't rob anybody of that. It does, even if you were to take stuff away or like suspend these people for life from the game or whatever, like. You're not taking away all of their earnings. You're not taking away the money they gained from the World Series. You're not doing any of that. It just, I think at this point, it is almost better to cut our losses, learn from it, and move forward. Now that being said, we've said it a couple hundred times now. You know what I mean? But the whole thing where I'm more interested in now the owner's involvement and from other teams, because we seem to know almost all of what the Astros did for right or wrong. Like, we seem to know, as deep as it goes. Now, I want to know for other teams, like, has this been going on? Maybe even some teams' minor league system. Maybe the Yankees. Maybe they have a system like this. Maybe the fucking, how the fuck? And again, if they do, how do you know now? Because now, if you know the Astros are being investigated for something like this, and you're another team that wasn't getting looked at, you're deleting all your records, you're throwing everything out. You're not incriminating yourself. So,
right, or figuring out a more sophisticated, undetectable way to do it.
And that's something else. Yeah, is like with a cell phone, can you really stop it? Can you? I don't think so, because you're doing it. They're doing it with some advanced camera nowadays. Your cell phone could probably do that zoomed in. You know what I mean? Like, get the right fucking handheld camera. Get any of that. What are you gonna do? Ban all cameras in the outfield? Sure, that's a possible solution, but even then, like on some level, like I think people would have a less problem with this whole issue if there wasn't the algorithm involved, right? Like, if this was just a matter of somebody looking at signs and, like, seeing the catcher put down a 2 and calling out curveball and yelling curveball, I don't think this would be a big issue, because it's like anybody could do that. But the fact that it was going through that computer algorithm to spit out a result, isn't that like the big problem,
well, of course,
right? Like,
yeah, I think so, definitely. I mean, when you combine, it's definitely gamesmanship as far as just sign stealing through the normal patterns. Like you said, I mean, like, if a team is dumb enough to, keep their, their signs consistent the entire time and not change anything up at all, and you pick it up, I mean, that's just, being observant. But when you combine technology and a built-in advantage that the other team can't possibly have access to, as far as like when you're playing at home, having the camera from center field directly on the catcher, and like you can't replicate that as far as being the other team in that situation. Where even like, for example, like we were discussing with steroids, like, you know, back in the steroid era, like if two teams were competing in the World Series, there's a good chance that both of those teams had some juicers on there, and you know, maybe one team had a slightly better advantage than the other, but I mean, like, you can say that they were kind of competing on a fair playing field in the sense that everybody had or was juicing. But with the Astros playing at home, that's simply something that another team couldn't possibly replicate in that environment. And I think that's what makes it kind of distinctive in that sense.
I agree, but I think now we must definitely just turn our eyes to, I guess, what is going to happen now to management. You know, we've already talked about what happened to the front office of the Astros, but as far as I know, the owner's still there, right? And he's still in place, and there's nothing been done to him.
Yeah,
I mean, the team lost.
Public...
The team lost some draft picks in the future, you know, so it's not like they weren't sanctioned at all. But as far as like actual, you know, real punishments, I don't think there's been much. But I know you proposed earlier that maybe the league make him sell his team, like something that happened with the what's his name, Donald Sterling.
With Donald Sterling, with the Clippers,
when all that stuff went down with the NBA, you know, they just said, well, fuck it, you know, you can. They don't want to lose him his wealth, right, or whatever, but you can't be involved in this anymore. You have to sell the team. And,
no, I mean, I think that that's something where it is a bit drastic, and I get why people may consider it that, but at the same time, I feel like that's the best like firewall as far as making sure it never happens. Because if you have that's the only thing, right? Is that probably in order for that to happen, you're going to have most, if not all, the other owners agree to that. And
that's
if all of
else.
them have their hand in the cookie jar and they know that it could be them getting their ownership revoked, then there's a really good chance that they might all, you know, stick together and make sure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, the whole reason, like we were saying, like why the players weren't necessarily punished. You know, it might literally be because the Players Association wanted no part in punishing players, and even if stuff went south, the worst that could possibly go, there'd be a limit to how much you could do to somebody, because the Players Association is not going to stand for, you know, banning somebody for life over something relatively small, even if they want, you know, players punished, like
right.
And again,
so yeah, I mean, pragmatically, I don't think that that's something probably the owners collectively would agree upon. So, you know, it is a bit kind of a ideal version of events in my eyes as far as that happening. But I do think that, you know, if you want to make sure it never happens again, then like threatening somebody's ownership and taking that away and making it go and get transitioned, I think really does send a signal to all other owners and future owners that if you get caught doing that or anything like it, that you run the risk of having the most important thing taken away from you as far as the ownership of your team. And I think that that is probably the best accountability mechanism, because, you know, you can replace a general manager, you can replace you know, players, you can do that. But if it's something that the owner is dead set on still continuing to do, and it's something that is being ordered from that point down, then I think that you got to address that in some way, and finding the organization $5 million or making them come out and do a public apology. I don't know if I don't think that's enough to make sure that teams and owners know that you can't do anything like this again. And, you know, for example, I mean, in the NFL, I mean, remember with the Deflategate, they did suspend Tom Brady for 4 games with the Bountygate, with the Saints and the players and how they were going after and trying to take people out for, you know, extra bonuses. That's something that Sean Payton, the coach, was suspended a year for, but also players were suspended, like Jonathan Vilma, and some other players were suspended for some games. So, I mean, like, we do have templates as far as other organizations, in professional sports, and these sorts of situations where you have to kind of deal with both the players, the organization, the management, so on and so forth, in a kind of balanced manner. And I think it's tricky and it's hard to do, but I really think that the MLB kind of botched at least how they initially handled it, as far as how it's being viewed by the players, by a lot of people that are in the media, a lot of fans. I think that a lot of people are just not overall satisfied with this initial response, and I think that there needs to be more done. I don't know exactly what the perfect answer is, but I think that more people's general consensus is more needs to be done.
I was
What
gonna
that more is, we don't know.
I was gonna say I do think if this happened during the season, I don't think it would be that big of a deal. I think the fact that it's happening in the off season when there's not that much to talk about, you know what I mean? And now it's the time when baseball talk is ramping up anyway the last 2 months. Once pitchers and catchers report, everything starts, going and flurrying and the cycle starts. So I think it happened at a poor time too. At least the investigation into it, you know what I mean? Like if you're the Astros, you're kind of hoping this gets blown under the rug before spring training or like in the off season. But now that it happened at like the very close of the off season into the new season, like right before spring training, that's almost the worst possible time. But I do think once the games start flowing, it'll be interesting to see. Like I think maybe the first few games they play wherever they go, maybe any home stadium or any away stadium they play. I think they're going to get booed, but the home stadium, I think that'll be very interesting because, will their own fans forgive them, or almost like, haha, we got them, kind of like how not Red Sox, I don't mean that, Patriots fans are with Deflategate, oh, fucking crybabies, quit your bitching, that's pretty much the
Right.
belief there, right? Where even if they did something, it's like, hey, nobody gives a shit. But with this, I wonder if Astros people turn on their own team, because I know like the ESPN guys have always said it, like there's going to be lots of generations of kids who don't even like wear Astros jerseys, or it's like a bad word. It's like the Baltimore of baseball, he who should not be spoken, the team who should not be named. But
Mm.
I
It could
I don't
overblow
know.
pretty quick.
It'll be interesting.
Or blow over, I guess, pretty quickly. Yeah, I think that that's definitely possible. I think people might have a short memory, and people might just be paying so much more attention to it because it is the off season and there's not really much to talk about. But with spring training and everything starting up and games, maybe it will just by a quarter of the way through the season become something that is not that big of a deal. But I think again that really becomes a question: what do we learn going forward, as far as more other teams being involved and deeper involvement from the Astros potentially into the 2019 season and so on. So like if we learn a lot more about that, there could be a lot more that comes of this, but we don't know if we will, or if this is the bulk of what we're going to get. So
Shit, from a marketing and PR perspective, we turned one team hardcore heel and we turned 31 other teams babyface, and I've never heard more talk about MLB. I hear more talk about MLB now than ever. Like people who don't even watch just talking about this whole cheating scandal. It's getting more coverage on ESPN than I've seen baseball get in the last like 10, 20 years since the A-Rod stuff. The A-Rod thing had a big coverage, but
no, definitely. It's inspired a lot more attention, I feel like, because, people are generally interested in these sorts of scandals. And, yeah, I mean, it might even, at the end of the day, work out a little bit better as far as the beginning ratings for the season. Maybe more people will tune in because they are interested to see how people are going to treat the Astros, if people are going to throw, pitches intentionally to hit people, or if the fans are going to boo them. I mean, there might be a lot more. There's a lot of theater that kind of gets thrown into that fans might want to be more attentive to, rather than not paying attention to. So I don't know. Maybe it could have kind of a weird end result where it's an overall negative story about the sport and its integrity, but it ended up having a positive media or positive buzz. You know what I mean? As far as overall attention and eyeballs.
yeah. No, I think the same thing, but I think being disappointed says the best. I don't think I'm not even surprised at this, but I'm definitely disappointed, and yeah, I mean I don't think we could really say any more about it, based on the information that's currently out there now, other than just speculation, but it's definitely something to watch going forward. Now, I want to thank everybody for watching, but I do want to say Now I'm going to try to have everything on webcam, at least a little bit, at least one webcam. Even if it's not perfectly synced up or whatever, it's better than nothing. We had a little bit of equipment issues, last year, but we're getting there. I also want to say I've been streaming 8 to 11 every Tuesday. We do a BWL. It's a 40-player Warcraft raid, so even if you don't know what that's about, you're welcome to come in and join me. We do it every Tuesday. I'm trying to get to 40 followers on Twitch. Other than that, everything we do is posted to YouTube. And yeah, I mean, we're going to try to do regular podcasts. We're going to try to do them every Monday at noon and every Friday at noon. So we're going to try to do those 2 days. Also, we're still going to do fight coverage probably, on, if not Sunday, maybe Monday after the big fights. Mostly big UFC cards. Smaller cards if there's big names. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. And out of Endicott.